Good evening. I realized I hadn't really done a video on this lathe for a little while. I guess compared to my other videos, it looks like there's been some progress made, but to be honest, it feels like not a whole lot's happened with it. Just COVID and busyness and all that kind of stuff. You can see it's gotten some paint thrown on it. But other than that, it's see, I'm getting the guard made for that flat belt drive. Just need to finish welding that together, get some studs made to mount it, and get it painted. And getting the electrical work done. I think I got a plan of attack made to get the VFD and the cabinet put in the back, and then get a control made to link the apron control to that VFD. Lots of bits and pieces. I don't know if you can see it, but there's I did find one of the other covers that I was missing for the gear train here. It's right here. So you get some paint thrown on it, and make some adjustments. But otherwise, it's the right part for this machine. But I think maybe it's a couple years apart from this one. There's a couple little corners need to be nibbled on. But yeah, little things here and there. But paint's not a big deal to me, but it's I figured now's the time to do it before it gets soaked in cutting oil again. And it does build morale. The biggest thing I'm trying to do right now is get the saddle refitted. This lathe does have quite a bit of bed wear, but it's going to be a while before I'll have the time and resources to really tear this thing down so I can get the bed planed and scraped and all that kind of stuff. But the cross slide was really bad. It was almost non-functional. And I decided to go ahead and bite the bullet and get that done. Ideally, I would have started with the bed first and kind of built up from there, but I figure the big thing with the saddle on this, actually, I'm going to walk over, we'll take a look at it. Take a walk through the shop here. I got the saddle over here in our inspection area right now on the big granite plate, so I can measure my progress in between scraping on it. So you might have seen in other videos when this thing started, the top of it looked like it had been used as an anvil. Just all kinds of beating and wear and all that kind of stuff on it. And it was to the point where there really wasn't any surface on top of this saddle that was original anymore, or at least nothing that was could be used as a reference point. And even on the bottom, there was so much wear, it was going to be hard to figure out. So I did find that there were some we'll call them non-precision surfaces that I could use for reference. Just to the sides of the dovetails here that were still original. Because nothing ran on them, they were still flat, but they'd never really been scraped or anything before. But it was honestly a better surface than most of these other ones. So starting on this thing, I was thinking I would try to take it to a buddy with a planer, maybe have him work it over, but then I just got anxious and got into it myself. I set it up on a Bridgeport, which was able to do the job, not in a single pass, but I was able to manipulate the ram and the head around to get all the surfaces cut. But as you can imagine, a part like this was kind of making the table and the knee move in ways that it really shouldn't have. So it wasn't the most accurate way of roughing things in, but it did work. Now, though, because this thing didn't necessarily cut as flat as it should have, I'm having to do a considerable more amount of cleanup. So you can see here at the most right now, it's got about 20 thousandths high in a couple places where pretty much when I was cutting that area, the table had kind of shifted and it cut a little less than in other spots. But you see, I'm having it rest on 3 points right now, 1 block in the front and 2 in the back on those original surfaces on the bottom. And I'm using that as my reference points. You see, I did cut across the top of the dovetail. Nothing really runs in that, but I did need to cut it down just to make sure it was going to clear everything. And I did kind of measure to see where it'd be high in places. It wasn't too bad though. And I've started scraping in the actual cross-slide surface there, and it's actually reasonably flat. I need to come back to it and get it get those flats versus the rest of the way scraped in. I've kind of taken a break from them though to focus on the tops of the saddle here. Even though these are not going to be as accurate of a place, I want them to be reasonably flat. I want them to be within a thousandths measured with an indicator, maybe within 2 or 3 thousandths. So I'm not really going to print them or anything. I just want them to be flat and coplanar to each other, so I could set either different bits of fixed string or indicators and stuff on them, and know that they're going to be coplanar with the rest of the machine. Now the actual cross slide itself is pretty much already done, with the exception of the inside dovetail surfaces. I've not yet scraped in the surfaces, the underside dovetails here and here. But by the time I had cut material down off the saddle, as well as cutting the underside of the cross slide, I lost about an 1/8 inch of material, a 16th off of each side. And I added that all back to the cross slide via some 1/8 inch Rulon that was glued on. And that is now a flat surface. So the bottom of the cross slide is coplanar with the top of the cross slide. The last step with that is going to be the inside surfaces of that cross slide, which will become my reference to these inside surfaces. And I'll get these to where they're running reasonably parallel and reasonably, well, they will be parallel and reasonably square with the rest of the saddle. My plan is, because I had not started with doing the bed first, to focus on just getting the top of the saddle done. And then if I kind of see it, that the worst thing happening is that the cross slide is just a little bit out of square with the waves, and my plan is to correct that whenever I finally do get around to getting the waves planed. And I'll build up the bottom of the saddle with some wear material and make any corrections to the squareness down there, because it won't be very much. I'm talking about, if it's 1 or 2 thousandths out of square or something like that. But it is a lot better already than it was. It's not as good as I want to be, but it's getting there. You can see where there's a spot here where the T-cell had been broken out, and I sunk some, these are just some mild steel pieces, they're not cast, but I sunk them in there with some Loctited screws and leaded the tops in. I might need to come back to that with a little more lead by the time the scraping's all done. So it's kind of interesting too here. That was clean last night. It keeps getting more oil. I think there's like a spongy part of the casting there that just keeps oozing out. Every time I wipe it away and do another scraping pass, it like exposes the pores and the oil comes out. So too bad that doesn't happen on the bottom side of the saddle. You get self-lubricating waves. You can see back here, this is actually the one part of the machine that still has the original flaking or scraping present. This is where the taper attachment mounted. And so when I started, this was all painted over, and so I cleaned it off and stoned it pretty well. And the stoning did kind of shine at some of the high spots. But I'm hoping that this style of flaking, I want to try to mimic it with the tops of the saddle here, just for looks, appearances. There's also a considerable amount of spot where the chuck had run into the saddle here, especially on the side of the cross slide, but across here too. That I filled that in with some JB Weld in it. Well, first thing I did was use a torch to kind of bake the oil out of it so it'd be nice and dry, and then set the JB Weld to it. Seems like it took pretty well. One other thing I did too was that after cutting these surfaces down, I came back with a ball nose end mill and cut a relief between this top surface and the way there, because even though the way is a little higher, it produced a corner right here that was really tricky to scrape into, because every time I'd scrape it, like, you get little ding marks and stuff with the blade running into that corner. It was leaving high spots. So doing that, it made it easier. I can scrape off the edge there, and in addition to it, it'll make a nice little place for oil and stuff to run off of it. And it's not deep enough that I don't think it's going to affect the structural integrity of the casting. Yeah, I think I've probably taken, like I say, I ended up taking about an 1/8 inch total out of the cross slide, 16th off the cross slide, 16th off the top of the saddle there. I might have taken maybe 100,000ths off the top of the four rings there. There are some places where it still shows some wear. You can see here where the fly cutter came across here, and there was a spot here in the front where it didn't quite hit. I'm not too worried about that. It was just where it was the lowest, because the cross side had wore down so much that it was really riding more on the top of the those top surfaces there. And normally that there should be like a gap there. It should be riding on these surfaces here and here. And there's also a cover plate that slides across here with the cross slide to cover up this exposed area, and that survived. It just had a surface grind either side of it, and it's going to be fine to go back in place. But yeah, that's a lot of scraping to take care of. In retrospect, I probably should take this thing to Steve's planer. Let him do the rough work. He's always so bored over there. But that's the saddle. The trusty scraper going at it. That blue one's actually holding up pretty good. I rebuilt it when I first got it, put some new parts into it and repainted it. And initially I was concerned that there was a bit of wear in here, and these little slide plates, and those pieces are not available anymore. And so I was kind of living with it. It would kind of rock a little bit, and as long as I kept scraping in the middle, and it wasn't a problem. Then one night I got adventurous, and I put some shim stock in it. Actually, very little shim stock, and it was back to being nice and flat again. So it's still got some mileage left in it. But lots of projects to get done. Now you can see down here, this is the cross slide. So this top surface has been surface ground, as well as the surface ground the bottom prior to adding the rule on. And this surface now has been scraped in flat to a surface plate and parallel with the top of the saddle, or top of the cross slide. And so the last thing is I need to scrape in, not this side, because that side's got the gib, which will scrape and straighten the gib, but this side I need to scrape in, and then that will be my master to make this thing square with the rest of the saddle. But it's getting there. Details. I'm using a Krylon Tough Coat on here, and it's actually doing pretty well. for the most part, I've been trying to remove all the original paint before I put a new coat on, because I don't like this thing was that green before. These guys in their John Deere green, but I didn't want to, you know, paint's eventually going to scratch off no matter how good a job you do, and I don't want to see these little, you know, arcs of green underneath it. So there's some places where I'm just getting the green prepped and solid enough that I know the new coat will stick to it. Other places I'm trying to get all that green off. But little things. See, I do have a coolant pump set up in it. It works for this machine. It's a pretty high pressure system. It's an old Brown & Sharp gear pump with a I can't remember what the ratio is on, but I think it's running about 600 RPM. But it was going good enough. I had actually put a relief valve to vent some of that pressure back into the sump before it gets up to the saddle there. This thing doesn't have a containment around it, so that pressure would be handy if I got to bore out a hole or something like that. I can really get the oil down there. See, I got the steady rests both cleaned up. They're both pretty well complete. Originally, the fasteners they used are a little more special. They made it so that all the fasteners on these could be adjusted with a, or at least all the square head fasteners on this could be adjusted with a 5/8 wrench. You know that some of them are different size bolts, and off the surf fasteners are kind of all over the place. So like this is an original square head bolt. I think it's a 7/16. This one's got a 3/8 head on it though. And so I've got some blanks cut. I'm going to make some of these bolts so that they all match. Just a little matter of convenience. But all in all, this bed, I've been pleased with the amount of wear it has. When I first got this lathe, it looked a lot worse than I think it actually was. And the more I've cleaned it up and stoned the high spots and really gotten to measure it, it is pretty worn, but just not enough to kill the machine. And so I think if I get that saddle back together, we'll get some years of service out of this before I have to tear it down again. Yeah, more projects.